Here's your chance to win a new iPad from Business English Pod. To celebrate our 6th anniversary, we're giving away a 32-megabyte iPad 3 to one of our lucky premium members. All you have to do is sign up for a new premium membership or renew your existing membership, and you'll be entered into our July 18th sweepstakes for a new iPad. Head over to businessenglishpod.com to get started. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons. Today, I want to start with a situation. Imagine this. You are sitting in your office trying to catch up on paperwork. A colleague walks in with a panicked look on his face. He says, "This proposal has to go out by 4 p.m., but the formatting is all messed up. Could you help me?" Sound familiar? And I bet you'd like to reply, "I'm afraid I'm too busy at the moment." But what you really say is, "Well, okay." Or, "I'm kinda in the middle of something, but maybe during lunch." Or, "Let me think about it." Why is it so difficult to say no? Well, of course you want to be polite, and kind, and agreeable, and a good person who helps out his coworkers. If it's a boss who is asking you for something, you may fear losing favor or opportunities. And if it's a client or customer asking for something, you might not want to ruin the relationship. But what I want to tell you is that in many cases, you should say no, and you should know how to say it. You and your time are important. And if you're too busy, well, you're too busy. You need to avoid overcommitting. If you try to do too much, you'll do nothing well. Saying yes to everything can lead to disaster, even though you feared the results of not saying yes. And remember that people can usually see when you want to say no, but can't. That doesn't make you appear very strong and confident. Those people will keep asking you until you find a way to say no, clearly, firmly, and honestly. That's the key. You need to be clear, firm, and honest. There are several ways we can do this. First of all, treat no as a normal thing. If you make a big deal of your refusal, it will seem like a big deal. So avoid long explanations, and don't be too apologetic. Many people apologize automatically, saying, "I'm so sorry, Dave, but I can't." But should you really be sorry for being busy? Save your apologies for times when you really foul something up. Second, learn to be firm. You may want to hesitate or hedge by saying, "Well, I'm not sure," or "That might be possible." In many cases, you're just doing this because you're trying to find a way to say no. So, just say no firmly. Don't leave the door open to negotiation or discussion. If it doesn't work, say, "That doesn't work." This is not only firm, but clear. You see, we often want to give excuses for not being able to do something without saying clearly that we can't. So, your boss asks you to come in on Saturday, and you say, "Gee, that's the weekend, and I was thinking of going golfing." That's not clear. "I can't come in on Saturday" is clear. People appreciate honesty, so tell them the truth. If something is not possible, say so, and be specific. So if a customer asks for a quick turnaround when your company doesn't have the resources to make it happen, then say that, like this: "There's no way we can do it in that time frame." You can even highlight your honesty by starting with something like, "I have to be frank here," or "To be perfectly honest with you." That emphasizes the fact that you're being realistic. One final tip for today. If you really want to be clear, then start your response with our magic word itself. That's right. Just say no. Of course, you might want to say a bit more than that. Just no is rude. But consider something like this. No, Dave, I can't help you right now because I'm behind on my own work. That's clear, firm, and honest. Now, you might be thinking that sometimes you need more diplomacy. You can't just shut the door in someone's face with a clear and firm no. Well, that's what we'll talk about next time. We'll learn some ways to soften our no's while keeping them firm and clear. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So, here's your chance to win a new iPad from Business English Pod. To celebrate our 6th anniversary, we're giving away a 32-megabyte iPad 3 to one of our lucky premium members. All you have to do is sign up for a new premium membership or renew your existing membership, and you'll be entered into our July 18th sweepstakes for a new iPad. Head over to businessenglishpod.com to get started. Hello, and welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today we're talking about how to say no. That's right. Someone asks you for something or to do something, but you have to say no. That's not always easy, but it's important. Think about the results of not saying no. If you accept everything, you'll have too much to do, and the quality of your work will suffer. Timelines will become unrealistic. You will be seen as nice, but possibly unreliable. And for you, it will mean more stress, anxiety, and frustration. We've all experienced this. We're overwhelmed with work and realize that we should have said no somewhere along the way. And when we only have ourselves to blame, we feel terrible. In our last episode, we learned some great ways to be firm, clear, and honest when saying no. This will help you protect your time, your work, and your reputation. But of course, you don't want to offend anyone. Sometimes we need to manage other people's feelings when we say no, or we need to make sure we're not seen as uncooperative. Today, we'll look at some ways to do this. One very common method is to use the word but. If your coworker asks you to sit on a special committee, but you don't have the time, here's what you can say. That committee is important, but I have too much work right now, so I'm not going to be able to help. What you notice here is that you still have the clear and firm part. I'm not going to be able to help. But before the word but, you've acknowledged the other person's request. Saying, that committee is important, recognizes the other person's work. Also, notice in this case that there is a reason for the refusal. I have too much work right now. You shouldn't give a long explanation, but reasons can definitely help soften the no. And specific reasons are better than general ones. For example, I can't commit to that because I'm heading up the new design project and we are facing a big deadline. As you can see, your reason for saying no is a sense of responsibility to someone else. And that is not a bad thing. Another way you can soften your refusal is to offer something else in return. That something else could be a suggestion. For example, I've got a big deadline, so I can't help, but you might want to ask Todd. He's not busy today. You see, we can't help out directly, but we can offer a possible alternative solution. The something that you offer could also be another part of you or your time. Imagine a colleague at another branch asks you to pay a visit and teach him how to use some new software. You don't have the time to visit, But you could offer help in another way, like this. I'm too busy to come by, but I could give you a half hour of help over the phone tomorrow. You can see that in these situations, no is not the final word. You have a refusal and an alternative, which is still an attempt to help. Remember that being firm and clear and protecting your time and integrity does not mean being rude. Someone might really need help, and you should show empathy. If you can manage all of these things in your refusal, you will earn people's respect. Think about how this sounds. I understand you're under a lot of pressure, Brenda. With my workload, I just can't give your project what it needs. It wouldn't work. But I can look over your work breakdown structure. And for ongoing help, I suggest Greg. He'd be great for this. That response does everything a good refusal should. Well, that's all for today. They wanted me to go on for another couple of minutes, but I said no. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. Have a great summer, and I'll be back after the break. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Welcome back to the Skills 360 podcast. I'm your host, Tim Simmons, and today I'm going to encourage you to mind your language. What on earth do I mean by mind your language? Well, consider a statement like this. We have to cut costs. Meet me in your office at 2 so we can talk about how to do this. How does that sound? The statement doesn't have any problems with grammar or vocabulary, but how does it sound? Is it acceptable? Well, what if I said this instead? I think that cutting our costs might be a good idea. How about sitting down to talk about this? Would 2 o'clock in your office work? You can surely see that the second statement is softer than the first. I don't just mean it's more polite. I mean it's less forceful and more diplomatic. Now, I don't want to suggest that forceful or authoritative language is never useful or necessary. It is useful for some people in some situations. But in the majority of our everyday communication, we need to mind our language. I'm not just talking about keeping things nice for clients and customers. I'm also talking about fostering good relationships with colleagues, superiors, and subordinates. Yes, today's managers have to mind their language when speaking to those they manage. So, let's talk about how we can do this. For starters, we need to look at a very important group of words called modal verbs. Modals are words like might, would, must. These words carry not just meaning, but power. Just think about it. A project leader comes to you on a Friday morning and says, "You must come in tomorrow to finish the report." And you grit your teeth. Or he comes to you and says, "We really should get that report done before Monday. Would you be able to come in tomorrow and help get that finished?" The difference is clear. The second statement uses should and then would to make a request. But the first statement uses must, which is too forceful. Come to think of it, how often do you really hear people use the word must? In fact, it's simply too strong for most situations. Okay then, how are these modals grouped? Well, we've got a bunch of strong ones, including must, have to, and need to. These modals present no choice. They are used to give orders or showing obligation. Then we have a group of medium-strength modals, such as might, may, can, should, could, and ought to. These expressions can be used for recommendations, suggestions, and advice. Then we have requests, which we can make with words like can, will, could, and would. Now, listen to how changing one word slightly can change the tone of a statement. Imagine a colleague comes into your office to talk about a presentation you have just given. He says, "You should have used fewer slides." Or he says, "You could have used fewer slides." Can you see how using could have sounds like a gentle suggestion while should have sounds too opinionated? This is really about tone and effect rather than just meaning. The trick here is that we often use softer language, even when we want to express a stronger idea. For example, what if I'm a senior engineer talking to a junior technician? I want to tell him to do something. He doesn't really have a choice, but I really don't want to come across as a jerk. So I don't say, "You have to finish those drawings today." Instead, I say, "We really should have those drawings finished today." Or, "Those drawings are important. So could you have them done by the end of the day, please?" You see, I'm using the language of recommendation or request to tell the technician what to do. My language might seem to indicate that he has a choice, but given the context, he doesn't. This is an important idea. It relates to something called imperatives. An imperative is an order, like close the window or clean my cup. There's no subject there, just a verb. In many languages, imperatives are not considered rude, but in English, they are generally too forceful. So we avoid them by using requests. You will hear people during a meal say, "Could you please pass the salt?" rather than, "Give me the salt." In fact, "give me" is the king of impolite imperatives. This has produced a rhyme that many children grow tired of hearing adults recite. "Gimme, gimme never gets. Don't you know your manners yet?" So, while our parents kindly remind us to mind our language, our colleagues, supervisors, and clients will not. They will simply be put off, disgruntled, or downright offended. Today we've covered modals, imperatives, and requests. But there are lots of other ways we can soften our language. Tune in next time to find out how. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon. Business Skills 360, the podcast that looks at the other side of business English. Hello, and welcome back to Skills 360. I'm your host, Tim Simmons. And today, we're going to look at more ways to mind your language. If language was just about meaning, we would probably communicate very directly with as few words as possible. But it's not, and we don't. Every time we speak, we are not only conveying meaning, but also acting socially. We need to consider relationships, feelings, and perception. So we mind our language. Last time, I talked about modals and the difference between saying "you must do something" and "could you do something." These two ways of speaking are miles apart. Today, I'll talk about lots of other ways to soften our language. Let's start with 3 relatively simple adverbs: rather, quite, and fairly. You can use these words before an adjective to soften the tone a bit. A coworker asks you about a letter he has written. You think it's too wordy, but you don't say, "It's too wordy." Instead, you soften the effect by saying, "It's rather wordy." Or instead of saying, "It's too formal," you say, "It's quite formal." You're only switching one small word, but it makes a big impact. Now let's look at 3 relatively simple adjectives: little, slight, and minor. Think about the difference between "the website has a problem" and "the website has a slight problem." It's neither here nor there how big the problem is. Calling it slight helps to make the statement less forceful. It's really amazing how adding just single words can change the effect of what we are saying. 2 of the most common softening words are maybe and perhaps. These words can transform a definitive statement into a mere possibility, like this: "Perhaps we need to consider letting a few employees go for the summer." Or this: "Maybe what you should do is talk to Jane directly." All of these words I've mentioned are part of what we call hedging language. Hedging language simply makes our statements less assertive. There are more ways to hedge. One useful technique is to qualify the number, frequency, and certainty. Qualifying numbers means using expressions like a few, some, or several. So instead of saying, "There are mistakes," you can say, "There are a few mistakes." It's softer. Qualifying by frequency means using expressions such as occasionally, sometimes, or from time to time. For example, on a performance review, it may be useful to say, "From time to time, Joe does not prepare sufficiently for presentations." And qualifying by certainty means using modals such as might, could, and may. So rather than saying, "Our bid will not be successful," you can say, "Our bid might not be successful." In all of these examples, you can see how one expression can tone down the strength of our statements. Sometimes hedging and qualifying require more than just one word. There are a variety of expressions we can use to change a statement of fact into one of opinion or curiosity. Here's a situation. A designer shows up at a meeting with some new brochure designs. You think the designs are too trendy for your company. So here's what you say: "I wonder whether these designs are a bit too edgy for our brand." By introducing the idea with, "I wonder whether," it sounds like you are just thinking out loud, rather than making an assertive pronouncement. It's softer, and the meaning will get through with less risk of offending someone. You can also admit up front that what you're about to say is just your opinion. You can do this with expressions like, "From my perspective," "the way I see it," and "in my opinion." These phrases are diplomatic because they seem to say, "I understand that you might have a different opinion." And that's important. People are more likely to accept your ideas, opinions, suggestions, and directions if they think you're not trying to ram them down their throats. When you come across as too assertive, demanding, or authoritative, your social message will cloud your real message, and that's counterproductive. That's all for today. If you'd like to test yourself on what we've just covered, have a look at the mybeonline.com website. There you'll find a quiz about today's show, as well as a complete transcript. So long, and see you again soon.